Public-private partnerships, a need-to-know tutorial for the emerging PPP practitioner, a video presentation from the Institute for Public-Private Partnerships. Hi and welcome. I'm David Baxter, Director of IP3. Over the next 20 minutes, we'll walk you through an introductory lesson on public-private partnerships, or P3s as they are commonly referred to. You will learn what P3s are, how they work, and why governments all over the world are now using P3 procurements to build, operate, and manage their core infrastructure projects. IP3 has been a world leader in P3 training and consulting for nearly 20 years. We're excited to offer you this free introductory lesson on P3s. Ned White, P3 Senior Advisor and co-founder of IP3, will lead this session. Ned has over 20 years of experience in P3 consulting. I will see you again at the completion of this lesson with a special offer from IP3.
Thank you, David. Hello, I'm Ned White. I'm one of the co-founders of IP3, and over the next 20 minutes, I'll be your instructor for this introductory lesson on public-private partnerships. Let's get started. Briefly, we will cover what are public-private partnerships. Public-private partnerships are contracts between a public sector and a private sector entity which require the private sector to deliver some services and bear risks such as design, construction, operation, and delivery of services in exchange for payments. We will also look at why are PPPs used to finance and procure public infrastructure. One of the things that we will see is that the private sector is much better able, in general, to bear certain commercial risks, such as the aforementioned risks of designing projects, timely completion and construction, control of costs, operating risks, etc. We will also review what are the main challenges for governments when using PPP procurements, look at some of the issues involved with open competitive tendering, as well as unsolicited proposals. And lastly, we will cover what are the keys to developing successful PPP projects in practice. So PPPs, it's important to understand, are now accepted as a global phenomenon. The market really began in the late 1980s, early 1990s. And back then, the entire size of the global market for private investment in infrastructure in developed economies was about $25 billion just for the year. Today, that market has grown several fold, at latest count, attracting over $180 billion in global developing economies across all sectors of infrastructure, including energy, information communications technology, transportation, and water and sewerage. From the pie charts here, we can see the interesting phenomenon of the growth of PPPs in countries like Brazil and India. Today, we note that the country that has attracted the most total private investment in its infrastructure amongst developing economies is Brazil. Closest second to that is India, thanks in large part to what both countries have invested in the preparation of bankable PPP projects and a fully developed legal and institutional framework for the analysis, approval, and implementation of PPP projects. We also see that PPPs do not fall under one specific type. There are many different types with ranges of different maturity and investment size, from contracts as short as service contracts for 2 or 3 years, all the way to build, operate, transfer, and build, own, operate projects lasting a contract term of over 30 years. Each of these techniques mixes different responsibilities in terms of what is allocated as a responsibility of the private sector and the public sector. One of the things that's important to note here is that all the way on the right hand of this matrix, it shows that one key responsibility of the public sectors that cannot be delegated to the private sector is responsibility for infrastructure sector planning, as well as the regulation of quality and cost of services. All of these techniques, ranging from service contracts to concessions and BOTs, all apply the same principles of allocating risks to the party best able to manage each risk and trying to deliver better value for the public's money when it comes to infrastructure and public services. There are a number of important advantages that PPPs potentially offer. One of them is the ability to control project life cycle costs. Often, when projects are implemented in the public sector, they're built, but oftentimes not well maintained, and little preparation, planning, or management is done to ensure periodic replacement of medium-term assets. As a result, it's not unusual that public infrastructure projects will suffer from lack of maintenance and the inability to manage life cycle costs. In the PPP arrangement, these are transferred to a private service provider who ensures they're done throughout the entire life of the projects, ensuring better reliability and quality of services. PPPs also offer the ability to better allocate risks. When structuring PPPs, the technique most often used is to allocate the risks to each party that is best able to manage each risk. When risks are traditionally all allocated to the public sector traditionally doesn't do as effective a job in managing risks such as effective design, risks of timely completion of projects, construction cost management, as well as the aforementioned life cycle costs. Another key advantage that PPPs offer is the ability to attract more competitive and innovative technologies and solutions from the private sector. It's interesting to note that one of the key drivers for PPPs, even in the information and communications technology sector, is simply that governments wanting to gain access to new technologies find that the best way to do that is through PPP arrangements where the private sector not only provides the equipment and the technology, but is also responsible for its implementation and its successful performance over the term of a contract. The other key advantage that PPPs offer is the larger the size of the project, generally speaking, the greater the potential value for money benefits from a PPP. Another way of thinking of that is that the larger the cost of an infrastructure project is for investment, the larger the risk that the public sector will incur cost overruns or expensive completion delays. That said, it means that PPPs, especially for large projects, have the potential to manage these large risks much better and deliver what is called better value for the public's money. There are a number of common misperceptions about PPPs. Some of them, beginning with the first, are that PPPs are less expensive to prepare and to develop than traditional public works projects. In PPPs, there is actually a greater requirement for more detailed due diligence, more detailed analysis and design, and especially the allocation of all project risks ahead of time. It takes more time to do this, it costs more money to do this than traditional public works, which place almost all of these risks on the public sector. But the advantage is that in the long run and over the life of the project, better performance is delivered. But a key requirement to know before you get into a PPP is they are going to take more time to analyze and prepare and to contract when compared to traditional public works. A second common misperception is that PPPs are easier for government agencies to implement. In fact, for the same reasons as described above, they actually require more effort and more due diligence by client government agencies than compared to traditional public works. In fact, they also require more detailed monitoring of performance over the life of a contract. A third misconception is that PPP financing terms are cheaper than traditional public financing. This is not the case. In fact, private partners traditionally need to borrow at rates that are more expensive than can governments and traditional public sector agencies borrow. What this means, however, is that the private sector's better management of key risks like construction cost risk, operating risk, and other risks needs to outweigh the higher costs of private sector financing. A fourth misconception is that PPPs will actually help reduce the size of the government. This is also not the case. While a side effect of a PPP may be that there is a larger private sector than there was before, the reason for doing a PPP is not simply to try to shrink the size of government. Government has a very important role, as was described, to play in the planning and regulation of public services and infrastructure. There are a number of examples of PPPs that have given governments innovative solutions that they would not have been able to achieve on their own. One example from Senegal is of a 10-year lease or affirmage contract for its water sector. This project increased the number of households receiving piped potable water from a reported 217,000 to over 325,000. One of the keys to the success of this PPP in Senegal was how the government invested in creating a very strong public sector asset holding company to be able to negotiate and work cooperatively with a well-capacitated, strong, and well-funded international private water operator. Another example of a PPP is South Africa's How Train project. This involved a 20-year concession providing over 80 kilometers of fixed high-speed passenger rail linking Johannesburg and the OR Tambo International Airport, and it did so using the latest high-speed rail technologies. Another example from Central Africa is the Kivu-Watt Power Project, in which a total private investment of some $142 million actually went into the construction of a 25 megawatt power plant. The plant draws its feedstock methane from the lake bed below and generates power, also solving an important environmental hazard, which was of exploding methane gases in the lake. Another example of a PPP project in the United States is that of the Design, Build, Finance, and Operate tunnel for the Port of Miami, Florida. The project, with a cost of over $1 billion, will connect a major highway to the Port of Miami, relieving congestion from downtown Miami. The project is financed on a non-recourse project financing basis and involved over 10 commercial banks lending to a new project company established just for the construction and operation of the tunnel. Let's review the PPP project cycle. The project cycle begins in the first phase with the development of the feasibility study and business case. In this example, it means that the PPP project is screened. Analysis is done to determine if a PPP would provide better value for the public's money. Risks are identified and analyzed, as well as the market is analyzed for potential private sector interest. Secondly comes the procurement phase. Under this phase, a public sector client will retain experienced transaction advisors who will help draft the request for qualifications, the request for proposals, as well as the PPP contract and its important performance output standards. Finally, they'll be advising on the award and negotiation of the final contract. Third comes the project implementation stage. Under this, terms are reviewed and revalidated. And finally, when the project reaches its operational phase, tariffs are regulated and the quality of service is monitored. There are a number of important criteria that need to be applied when preparing a PPP project. First is the project's economic viability, and this begins by first establishing what is the need for the new public service. It should be in line with sector policies and plans for the given infrastructure sector. Additionally, economic viability means that the project must be technically, environmentally, and economically viable according to traditional measures of feasibility. Once the need is established, the best procurement option needs to be identified. In this case, PPPs can achieve better value for the public's money when a full cost comparator is developed known as the public sector comparator. The option that provides the best value for money, whether it's from the public sector or the private sector, should be the one that is implemented as the best procurement option. Third, the project's financial sustainability needs to be analyzed and established. This means that the PPP project's risk allocation structure needs to be set, and it needs to be determined that this allocation of risks is actually sustainable given how the project will be financed. Private investors need to make sure that they are able to repay lenders in full with a healthy margin for debt service coverage, as well as earn an attractive rate of return on their own equity investments. Finally, fiscal affordability. PPP projects often impose new liabilities on the public sector, which is committing to pay a private partner things such as availability payments, capacity payments, or tariffs per unit for services delivered over the entire term of the project. It's important that governments, especially their ministries of finance and others, fully understand the impact of these and make sure that they have the fiscal resources to sustain the project. As mentioned previously, in most large PPP projects, a new project company, sometimes called the special purpose vehicle, needs to be incorporated and established. This represents the box in the middle of the diagram on this slide. The project company is incorporated by the shareholders. It receives a PPP contract, such as a concession agreement or an implementation agreement, from the government or the granting authority. Oftentimes, there is an off-taker, a public sector off-taker, who purchases and pays for the services delivered by the project company in accordance with a contract. In the case of the independent power sector, this is often called the power purchase agreement. In independent power as well, oftentimes there are key input supply agreements such as fuel supply agreements that need to be considered. Other contracts that make up this security package of project agreements include things like the construction contract with the construction contractor and equipment supplier, as well as operating contracts with a separate operating contracting firm. As mentioned, the new project company receives its financing from equity investments from shareholders, as well as the financing agreements from commercial lenders and bondholders. What this means is that PPP projects don't usually require just a single PPP contract, but they form part of a security package of project agreements. All these agreements need to be developed, negotiated, and agreed upon together so that all of their terms are consistent and support the sustainability of the project. There are a number of options for procuring PPPs. For larger PPP projects, often open competitive tendering is used and is preferred as the best method for delivering the best value for money for the public. This is oftentimes done together with shortlisting, so that only a limited number of bidders, anywhere from 3 to 6 different bidding consortia, are actually invited to finally submit proposals. For smaller projects or ones that are more complex or involve complex technologies and solutions, techniques may be used such as competitive negotiations, such as actually agreeing to negotiate with different partners at the same time on different technical solutions for a given infrastructure need. There may be also direct negotiations, sometimes known as sole sourcing, as well as unsolicited proposals, especially in areas of new and innovative technologies and project ideas. A further word about unsolicited proposals in PPPs. Unsolicited proposals offer the potential advantage in that it allows private providers with new ideas and innovative technologies to submit proposals to government that may not have occurred in the government's national development plans. However, unsolicited proposals also feature risks, such as governments may not know or be able to determine if a different proposer could provide better value or a better solution. There's also challenges in that they lack full transparency. As the diagram here shows, different countries have employed different measures of unsolicited proposals in their PPP programs. For example, in Chile and in Taiwan, there are specific guidelines on developers' fees that may be charged, as well as bid bonuses awarded in the case of unsolicited proposals. A common technique in managing unsolicited proposals is what is called the Swiss challenge, used in the Philippines, Korea, and elsewhere. This means that the original bidder must allow a competitor approximately a limited amount of time, such as 45 days, to submit a competing proposal. This puts more effective competitive pressure on the original proposer and helps promote greater transparency for unsolicited proposals. Let's review what we've covered in this introductory lesson. First, PPPs offer important opportunities to lower the life cycle costs for long-term infrastructure projects and to improve the quality of public services. offering better value for the public's money. Also, PPPs are not easy to prepare and to implement. They require careful planning and significant due diligence, and they actually have higher transaction costs than traditional publicly financed and procured projects. Thirdly, PPPs must be developed and implemented following a rigorous project management cycle with the assistance of experienced transaction advisors. Fourth, as we've seen, in PPPs, there are important fiscal risks facing governments and their affordability, and these risks must be carefully analyzed and monitored throughout the life of the project. We've also seen that PPP procurement is different from conventional government procurement. It requires the participation of experienced multidisciplinary teams to select the best bid. Finally, we've seen that the implementation and risk management for PPPs is critical to the success of these projects and requires skills and expertise that aren't usually available within the public sector. So in conclusion, it should be clear that governments must equip themselves to deal with the numerous challenges facing them in PPP projects. Capacity building and training need to be integral parts of any strategy to develop a robust PPP program. Because of the advantages to be gained through PPPs, these costs are well worth the effort. Certainly, it can't be denied that failure to properly train and staff governments for PPPs will likely lead to costly errors that far exceed the relatively modest amount of training that would be needed to avert such disasters. So, as the most experienced organization in the field of PPP training and consulting over the past 20 years, IP3 is pleased to offer this free introductory lesson to you.
Thanks, Ned. That was a great introductory overview to key P3 issues that governments face worldwide. Now, this is just the beginning of your P3 training experience. There's a lot more you need to learn about financial modeling, P3 procurement, P3 feasibility analysis, and P3 project monitoring and supervision if you intend to be active in P3 work. We want to help you jumpstart your P3 training and skills development by offering you a 10% discount on your first IP3 training course. IP3 offers an exclusive series of P3 classroom courses in our training facility in Washington, D.C. We also provide convenient online P3 courses. Simply visit our website to view our full course schedule and course information. When you register for your first course, include the promotion code IP3FIRST. We look forward to seeing you in one of our world-class P3 training courses soon.